Hello, this is my signature assignment week 8 screencast presentation and summary assignment. My name is Godfrey Brewa and I attend UMass Global, and this is for my inter negotiation alternate dispute resolution class for spring semester 1. And the steps I took towards interviewing Emma. The steps Emma's legal counsel should take in interviewing Emma is to watch for nonverbal cues and proceed from there. The lawyer should take the lead when it comes to interviewing the client because of the nerves and anxiety. For example, accordingly, in openings with clients, we should consider what the client is likely to expect or want. Just because the lawyer thinks she is engaging in informal chit chat unrelated to the client's matter does not mean that she is. The lawyer should be willing to take the lead from the client, from the stressed client who wants to immediately unburden himself to the client who is checking us out to see if we are qualified to represent her. Smith, page 518. And then steps towards interviewing Emma part 2. The lawyer should watch for nonverbal cues and let the client lead the conversation. When Emma is comfortable, for example, for these reasons, the attorney may wish to defer more entirely to the way the client wishes to proceed to explain her problem and goals. In a conversation where both speakers create order, the attorney may sacrifice some degree of prompt understanding and focus upon relevant facts and issues by listening to the client's narrative and gain better rapport with a client who wants such control. The attorney will also obtain the benefit of hearing the client's sense of the most compelling story and attitude towards the situation. Smith, page 520. Negotiation on Emma's behalf. Emma's legal counsel should utilize integrative bargaining to identify everyone's interests. For example, integrative solutions are generally more gratifying for all involved in negotiation, as the true needs and concerns of both sides will be met to some degree. It is a collaborative process, and therefore the parties actually end up helping each other. This prevents ongoing ill will after the negotiation concludes. Instead, interest based bargaining facilitates constructive, positive relationships between previous adversaries. And that is, and the author is Spangler 2003. Negotiate on Emma's behalf, part 2. The negotiation strategy also increases cohabitation with other parties to reach a resolution. For example, after interests are identified, the party needs to work together cooperatively to try to figure out the best way to meet those interests. Often by brainstorming, listing all the options anyone can think of without criticizing or dismissing anything initially. Parties can come up with creative new ideas for meeting interests and needs that had not occurred to anyone before. The goal is a win win outcome, giving each side as much of their interest as possible and enough, at a minimum, that they see the outcome as a win rather than a loss. And that is Spangler 2003. Preparation to mediate with Mrs. Potts and Mr. Jones. During mediation, I would articulate the weaknesses of the case in a non confrontational way. For example, in some circumstances, resolutions may be impossible without the expression and understanding of a party's emotional needs. Mediation not only allows for the expression, understanding, and the release of emotions, but also can create an opportunity for relationships to be preserved. In many cases, parties involved in a conflict have a continuing relationship, whether personal or professional. Despite the dispute, continuing the relationship in one form or another may be desirable or inevitable for the parties. And that's Moffat Bourdon, page 305. Arbitration. Emma's legal counsel should prepare to present the case for the arbitrator by stating she was preparing to eat her food when Mrs. Potts slid across the wet floor and landed on Emma's table, ensuring the bowl of soup landed on Emma. The dog raced to Emma, fearing she was in danger based on instincts. Emma's counsel would state the fact that Emma's experienced second-degree burns on 15% of her body and could not walk for over a month. Emma lost wages because of the injuries. It would be important to present the facts because an arbitrator makes the final decision and it cannot be appealed. For example, unlike mediation, however, arbitration is an adjunctive process. The arbitrator, like a judge, renders a decision based on the merits of the case. In arbitration, the parties do not create their own settlement. Instead, the arbitrator imposes a resolution on the parties, bounded only by the limitations articulated in the parties' agreement. Unlike in traditional litigation, the arbitrator's decision generally cannot be appealed. And that is Moffat Bordone, page 319. Arbitration Part 2. The appropriate outcome should be joint and several liability for Mr. Jones and Mrs. Potts. For example, in tort, joint and several liability may arise where A and B act independently to cause C the same damage. For these purposes, A could be a contract breaker and B a tortfeasor. In such a case, C is entitled to sue all or any of them for the full amount of its loss. If C sues A but not B, it's open to A to seek a contribution from B in respect of its relative responsibility. Practical law. Strengths and weaknesses. The strengths of the case for Emma is that Mr. Jones is didn't is the fence for the pets was 2 feet 10, and the hot spoon's wet floor sign was not in use that day. For example, Driscoll Town Ordinance 10012 reads as follows: all restaurants electing to have dedicated play areas for the pets owned by patrons shall have a barrier constructed along the length of said enclosure of a height not less than 3 feet and not greater than 6 feet. The Hot Spoon's pet enclosure fence is 210. The Hot Spoon has a wet floor sign. However, it was not in use that day. UMass Global 2025. Mrs. Potts lost her balance and poured soup on Emma, causing her injuries that caused Emma to not be able to go to work. And this is my references. This is Brad Sprangler. And then this next one, yeah, integrative or interest-based bargaining beyond intractability. And then my next resource is how mediation works when both parties agree they need help resolving the dispute. And then joint and several liability is the third reference. And then our primary textbook, Moffat M. and L. Oops, might have been pronouncing that. Bordone R.C. 2012, The Handbook of Dispute Resolutions Wiley. And then the second reference is the UMass Global reference I used for the information that I quoted from the Blackboard. And thank you, Godfrey Brewer.